Hello, LinkedIn friends. We're coming to you live from Nutanix.next Conference 2025 here in our nation's capital of Washington, D.C., giving you a front row seat to all of the excitement that we've experienced here so far this week. I'm Eric Selken, and I'm here with my esteemed colleague and industry icon, Mr. Lee Caswell. Lee, how you doing?
Eric, terrific to be with you, and what a whirlwind of a week.
It's crazy. So much goodness packed in this one event. A lot of exciting announcements, product releases. I'll just start from the top, Lee. What was the most exciting thing that we announced this week?
You know, the thing that really took my attention, right off was the work we're doing with Pure Storage.
Yeah.
Right? Working with external storage, I think for a lot of folks is just a little bit of a head turner to start with, because we were the inventors of HCI.
Right.
And the idea that we were now taking external storage systems, right? Bringing them in. We announced Dell PowerFlex last year, if you remember, right? EA,
Yeah.
GA now.
Available now.
Available now. And now, on a shorter time span, by the way, now we're announcing the EA of Pure Storage with GA coming later this year.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's mind-blowing to folks in the industry, right? Like over a decade ago, the first time I heard the name Nutanix, it was all about web scale, stacking pizza boxes, HCI. But with this choice that you've talked about, right?
Yeah.
What are the advantages it gives customers?
Well, I think Nutanix has a long history, right, of building something in an integrated fashion that gives a customer just a terrific experience.
Yeah.
Right? We started off with, as you mentioned, like with an integrated appliance, right? And then customers asked us, well, what about a choice of server, right? So if I wanted a server from Dell or HPE or Lenovo or Cisco, right?
Yeah.
So we did the extra work to make sure that customers could have that choice and preserve the user experience. And then customers said, well, what about a server I could rent? Right, and that became our Nutanix Cloud Clusters, right, available in Azure, AWS, and this week,
GCP.
Google Cloud, right?
Yeah.
And so now the next element was, hey, in these larger environments, we're likely to have, and we'll have, mixes of storage and HCI. So now the idea, we're extending that choice and bringing some of the usability, the operating model, as well as some of the new, basically VM level recovery to external storage. It's a really great match.
Yeah, and I think we even had a customer on stage talk about the beta, right, and their experiences there. So talk about, I mean, you mentioned a little bit use cases, but I think that's the next natural question that maybe people on LinkedIn Live are like, hey, we support this now, but like, when should I go with like the HCI model versus third-party storage?
I think if we look back around how scaling happens, first of all, HCI clusters, right, tend to be smaller in scale than large scale up storage systems. So you're getting access to some scale of performance and capacity, right? That's new for a lot of customers. And at the same time, those customers really prefer to have storage systems. I think they're storage buyers. There are a lot of people who are trying not to manage storage. HCI tends to fit more for those customers who are just trying to get the infrastructure out of the way. And so I think it's a really interesting match, right? To get both of these and to have our Prism interface now be a way to access both of these.
Yeah, no, it's great news, and I think it just talks about not only the flexibility and choice, but the evolution of like Nutanix and Nutanix Cloud Platform.
Right.
So onto that, some of my favorite announcements from day one was around the ecosystem. Right? To be kind of the de facto platform of choice, you need friends, you need interoperability, and
that's right.
In terms of our technology ecosystems and validated solutions with Nutanix and AHV. A lot of progress in the past few years, and a lot of new announcements that we talked about on day one.
It's interesting for me where, a year ago, for example, we announced 1,000 supported applications on AHV. This year, 1,200, right? So the pace is picking up all of a sudden, right? So you're starting to watch this, partly because the partner ecosystem is coming to Nutanix. They're trying to de-risk their environments just like customers are de-risking their own environments. And so terrific partner influx, I think, of activity. And we had some pretty interesting announcements, right? So Citrix adding support for NetScaler, right? To get load balancing for some of the largest VDI installations. Omnissa also, a former VMware entity now coming and supporting us. That's just a really interesting signal to the market, I think, that, hey, Nutanix is the go-to when, you think you have a lot of risk.
Yeah, no, and I think it goes along with just like the challenges customers are facing today, just with managing their infrastructure and with changes in the industry, right? Like migration has been a big topic for Nutanix and for the industry at large. So kind of talk about some of the use cases that you talk to customers all the time, right?
Yeah,
so the challenges they think they have with new migration, and how Nutanix can solve that.
Here's what a lot of customers were figuring out. We had customers who were running our software with VMware, for example. That actually has moved very fast towards Nutanix. So for example, when I joined the company just 3 years ago, right, 50% of customers were running AHV. Today, 78%, based on the number of total cores, are now running AHV. I mean, it's really shifting that fast. And now we have customers moving at scale, and they move. How do they move? Well, we have a tool called
Move.
Could be the easiest, best named product ever, right?
I know.
This is a free tool that's helping customers migrate those workloads quickly. And I'll tell you what, right? In the start of the company, sure, there was a lot of VDI. That's an important workload for us. What we're finding though, the number one workload today, databases. At performance, right? And basically delivering what I consider kind of the storage litmus test, which is consistent low latency performance during failure conditions. That's a tough order. Nutanix has filled it.
Yeah, I love it. And I think even if you want to go a little bit further and talk about, when we're talking about challenges at organizations' minds today, security.
Yeah.
Really good story that we talked about this week there too. So you want to talk about some of the updates? Yeah,
we've got an integrated security plan. One of the things that people get to when they start understanding that we have a full stack offering is that you can remediate security positions much more quickly, right? It's a one-click lifecycle management across the full stack, right? And that, along with some of the other security enhancements that we have, really makes us suitable for the most mission-critical workloads.
Love it. Okay, let's move on to day 2 today.
Yeah.
You just got off stage from doing a ton of great demos with some of the Nutanix
Very
team.
fun, yeah.
Right, and I think that's kind of the second thing that is the theme of .next is run anything anywhere.
Yeah.
And what that means for our customers.
Yeah, it's a real shout out, I think, to our engineering team for just a second, right?
Absolutely.
The execution that's happened over the last year is really nothing less than stunning, right? The idea that, from what we called Project Beacon, and if you looked back, right?
2 years ago.
This is the idea that, hey, we're going to go and allow people to run anything, anywhere. And today we announced the first GA, the EA of the Cloud Native AOS.
That's a big one.
So Cloud Native OS it's also interesting because it's a really tip of the hat to the modular architecture that's distinct to Nutanix, which is that our storage stack, this AOS piece, right, was designed outside of a hypervisor.
Yeah.
And that gives us the flexibility to have a choice of hypervisor. That was good, right? And now allows us to run directly on a Kubernetes runtime. We've containerized it and allows us to go deeper into the cloud, further out to the edge.
Right, and I think we announced compatibility at first with EA with EKS.
With EKS, right?
Yeah.
And so now we can look and say, hey, if you're going to go and run in a cloud native fashion, you can get access to our storage services, our data services, and that means you can do some pretty interesting things around doing, for example, block-based snapshotting, replication, and DR across availability zones.
Wow.
That's pretty cool, right?
Compelling.
So here's a new way to go get that enterprise data level. And we announced an EA, basically, of our external at the edge running directly on bare metal Linux, right? Wow. These are things that now all of a sudden just expanding the choice that customers have. We're not saying to do one or the other, by the way. You can run VMs, you can run containers in VMs, you can run VMs and containers, you can run directly on Kubernetes, or you can run on bare metal, but you have the full choice.
You can run anything anywhere. I just keep hearing
there
that
you go,
this
right?
week. Yeah.
It's a theme.
Yeah. The Cloud Native AOS, again, it's a game changer, mind blown type moment.
Yeah.
And I want to click into this a bit because, again, you talk to customers all day and every day.
Yeah.
And if you look at Nutanix, as you mentioned, a lot of the conversations over the past few years is about, hey, we're VMs, right?
Right.
But now we're both. So talk about some use cases from customers you talk about that are looking to use Nutanix as the platform to run both containerized apps and virtualized apps.
I think in the early days of containers, right, there was certainly some thought about were containers going to be the end of virtualization.
Right.
But what we found, right, is that containers provide the speed for developers, right? And one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to get the infrastructure out of the way so developers can get to work, right?
Yeah.
So whether it goes to platform engineering or to infrastructure engineering, the idea that you can now run containers, right, on VMs or directly natively, that's a real flexible option for customers as they start thinking about how these technologies, number one, are complementary, and number two, they're realizing this. their data centers aren't going away, number one. And number two, VMs are going to be here for a long time because they provide resilient infrastructure that allows you to run these containers.
Right, so you see use cases where they may be running containerized apps in clouds like AWS, Azure, GCP.
Yeah.
On-prem could be a virtualized environment, right?
Well, actually, I learned something interesting just in the last month, right? Which is that if you look at AWS and Azure, right, they're actually running their cloud-native environments on VMs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Right? And you're like,
you
well,
don't think about that.
Well, the customer doesn't have to manage those VMs, but you get that speed of deploying containers, right? And so what we're talking about with Cloud Native OS is the hypervisor is no longer a requirement. And that's actually just an interesting thing. Now, it means it's not a requirement from the customer. And so it's a really, I think, interesting expansion of the choice for customers.
Again, yeah, back to choice. And I think talking about cloud native containerized apps, we were in Barcelona a year ago today, and I would call that a coming out party for Nutanix Kubernetes platform, NKP.
Exactly, right.
So you demoed and showcased some new things going on with NKP earlier today, so you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, we're super excited about, we acquired a company, D2IQ, right, which has an installed base of, 6 years of production, running even in some of the dark sites. That was particularly important here in DC, right?
Absolutely.
Around running in dark site environments. And so we started thinking about how that Nutanix Kubernetes platform can run, not can it only run anywhere, but when you imagine a distributed environment, right? We showed kind of a cool demo of this, right? Showing a retailer, for example, like spread across Asia. And so now you can start thinking, well, how do I manage that at scale? And that means things like fleet management, observability, right, at the centralized level, because I don't have experts sitting in every retail environment. And so this is a way to go and manage configuration drift. It's a way to go and now provision new stores. And it's an interesting way for you to basically start thinking about how you can get leverage across a distributed environment.
Awesome. Another thing that we announced this week along those same lines was a new partnership with Canonical.
Oh yeah, right.
So tell me what you think about that.
Yeah, this is now taking Linux, right? And so as you start to think about running Cloud Native AOS, for example, right, or our NKP platform and the edge, you start thinking, well, listen, how do I make sure that's an enterprise level experience? And by enterprise, we typically mean three things, right? It's resilient, it has day two operations, so you can actually keep this thing up and running.
Right.
And that third, you've got some level of security and privacy. So that's an important, those elements. Now we're partnering with Canonical to bring that same level of enterprise to bare metal running Linux, presumably at the edge.
I love it. Yeah, enterprise scale is another key buzzword.
Yeah, right.
So thanks for defining that.
Yes.
Lee, I can't believe we're over 10 minutes into this conversation and neither of us have used the word AI yet.
What?
Yeah, what happened, right? We're a tech company.
Come on.
It's 2025.
It's time.
But we did have a lot of exciting things to share about AI.
We did.
At the conference. So just want to talk about that and maybe some of the announcements and partnerships we made, but also some developments in our own product.
Yeah. Everyone's really curious about AI, right? And how it's going to basically be deployed. And the enterprises that I'm talking to, right, they're thinking about, hey, I've got a business problem I want to solve. Could be an internal business problem, like a chatbot, right? Could be an external one, right? About how do I go and basically send notes to or emails to my customers more effectively. There's a whole set of application and areas, right? What we're finding is that AI is changing from a query response mode to now an interactive mode. We call this the agentic cycle, right?
It was LLM was the word, right? And
right.
Now you're saying it's evolved to the agentic AI.
Yeah, so there's these models that you want to now take the initial results,
right.
And I want to have those models now fed into another model, right, that would say, hey, let me go and look at that relative to my legal position, right, or ethical concerns, right? Let's go refine the results so I can get something back. There's something called re-ranking, right? There's something called embedding, right? And these models, we won't go into it here, but we've worked with NVIDIA to make sure that their new models, right, whether from their NIM architectures, that's their microservices, or the NEMO architectures, which is more of their models of basically embedding and re-ranking. Now we can go and basically help embrace these models, bring them into the enterprise, give you a production-ready result more quickly.
Love it. I think many organizations, enterprises out there today, no matter what the name of the company and the vendor, they're calling on them and talking about AI and how it can help. But I think when you talk to customers, what is our unique value proposition with AI,
Yeah.
with the challenges facing them, right? They need to innovate, they need to implement quickly. There's a lot of questions when they do that, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of moving parts, right? And so for a lot of customers, especially when you're investing, you want to make sure you don't make a mistake, right? And so you start thinking, well, how do I get choice again, right? Choice of GPUs. Well, we've got GPUs from all of our server partners, for example, and available through the public cloud. How about LLMs? Well, our integrations, right, with Hugging Face and NVIDIA, right, allow us to get access to qualified LLMs that you can now go and use and swap out over time as you choose, right? And now with the new NVIDIA work that we're doing, you can get the choice of models. And so as you build that all together, our offering, we call this the Nutanix Enterprise AI, right? Is basically making sure that AI is just the latest enterprise application for you. Full enterprise resilience, and you get choices for the things you might have to swap out over time.
So you're not locked in. You kind of remove that FUD that you hear from around the vendors because you have that choice, that flexibility.
Yeah, and we've done some interesting certification validation work with NVIDIA also, right, around the Nutanix, the NVIDIA AI Enterprise software suite, and around what they call the AI data platform. Because what's happening is if you have to buy a different architecture for every piece of whether I'm ingesting data or now processing the data or archiving the data, like all of a sudden you have a whole set of things and it basically blows past your team's ability to manage these. So now we can consolidate all of those, right, within a single architecture. That's the power of the Nutanix cloud platform.
Yeah, the easy button, you would say, for enterprise.
Exactly, yeah,
great. I mean, I think we've done a good job of covering like the major highlights.
There's a lot, right?
There's so much, right? I'm trying to remember everything else too. But I think like as we look back, let's say a year from now, right? We're at .next and city to be named later.
Yes.
What do you anticipate the next year bringing for Nutanix, our customers, and the industry at large?
Yeah, listen, as I look at the excitement and enthusiasm here, the buzz at .next, right? As customers, but also prospects. The number of prospects here was really stunning, right? Around customers who maybe looked at Nutanix 4 or 5 years ago, thought they knew what we did, and all of a sudden were really impressed with the range, right, of what this platform has expanded to be. So I think this next year, right, we're going to see wide-scale adoption of these new technologies, customers, using what, beyond what they're using today, and also prospects, the new customer elements, right, as new customers are coming to Nutanix, I'm expecting, whether it's for NKP, right, our Kubernetes platform, or NAI, our AI platform, or even for external storage, right? These will be new ways for customers to keep the lights on and find ways to bring Nutanix into their production environments.
Love it. One more question, I'll leave it on a myth buster. There's over 5,000 people here, right? A lot of them are talking to you, the subject matter expert on all things Nutanix. In terms of Nutanix Mythbusters, what's the number one, I guess, kind of misconception that you hear about, oh, I thought Nutanix was only this, that you've seen people's minds be changed this week?
Yeah, I think the thing that struck me this year, I'll give you an example. We had a customer talking about Nutanix, customer talking about Nutanix database service. And they had heard another large financial entity talking about Nutanix database service last year. And so, listen, it's great what we say, but the power of customers who are on stage, right, with Rajiv, right? We had customers on stage in day 2, right, with Inder Sidhu, right, our SVP and Chief Commercial or Customer Experience Officer. I mean, the customer testimonials, right, were actually stunning. The U.S. Navy, for example, Tractor Supply. I mean, these are big names, Assurant, right? Big companies. And what I'm watching for next year is, I think the customers talking about us to other prospects is going to be a really interesting advent for us.
Well, same time next year to our LinkedIn audience then, right?
We'll do it next year. So great to have you come in.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening along today. We wish you were here, but as I mentioned, coming soon, .next 2026 announcement. So catch us next year. And I think I'm going to end this because we do have a pinball machine over there. So I'm going to engage Mr. Caswell in a sport that I'm good at.
Oh boy, here we go. Watch out.
Thanks everyone for your time today.
Thank you.